All right. You are listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell Blues Deluxe. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Denise La Grassa. Hello, Denise.
Hello, John. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, let's talk about Denise growing up in, you were what? Wisconsin and Chicago. You were in both places, right?
Right. Moved from Chicagoland suburbs during the white flight period in the 60s. My mom had it with the suburbs and living there, having been from Scotland. She's from Scotland and was tired of just the kind of, uh, just the fights that were going on at that time. She in Scotland, growing up in Scotland, there was no uh, issue of race, right? Everyone
Mm-hmm.
was one. There was no color line, and the color lines were just really bad then. And so, Baraboo, Wisconsin, was a place that my father vacationed as a kid. And when my mom and dad would travel up there for vacations when we were kids to Baraboo, that was just, oh, she loved it because Devil's Lake is this glacier lake, right? And it looks like Scotland, the hills, it's just as beautiful as you get up into northern Wisconsin and middle of Wisconsin. That it's just a beautiful place. And she was like, would it be nice to raise a family here rather than there? Um, so there was just so much turmoil going on at that time. And so my father worked for Illinois Bell. He figured out a way to get a transfer to Wisconsin Bell. And then we grew up in this small town in Baraboo, Wisconsin.
And
And
then
that's how we landed.
you found yourself coming back to Chicago too later on.
Yeah, oh, yeah, because for me, I was fighting and screaming. I didn't want to go to a small town.
Yep.
I enjoyed vacationing there, but to me, I was like at that age of like what, 7. So I was third grade, going into the third grade. It's like I just felt connected to, even at that time, the city, and I loved the John Hancock building, and just really loved the city. Loved where my father grew up and would go down the block. Was a kid that played uh, for the Cubs or family. And
Yep.
he would go down to Wrigley and get to play the games. He said growing up, where when the Cubs lost, they brought all these kids from his neighborhood in Chicago out to play with the Cubs if they lost. So
Yep.
there was something about the Italian and the Irish and the neighborhood where my father and my mother met and married. There was something about Chicago that was just resonated with me, was so special. So I was just like, I don't know. I don't want to leave my friends. It's like second grade going to the third grade. I don't want to leave your friends. But we moved up there and ended up being a nice place to grow up, and a lot of really great experiences there. But
So
then as soon as I got out of high school, found myself in college for a bit, and then back down to Chicago.
I see as a kid you have a Guinness World Record.
Yeah, that was the other interesting thing that happened in Baraboo, because Baraboo is a circus town. It was a town um, where the circus folks would come up and spend their summers, and then they would go in the winter back to Sarasota, Florida. So they built this museum in Baraboo, Wisconsin, where you would have these circus wagons and little, like a museum, little
Yeah.
places where you would learn about the history of the circus. And they had an acrobatic school for youth. Hey, would you like to learn how to become a circus performer and perform all these different aerial acts and such? And so I was an athletic kid, and I was like, oh, I'll join. So I did. And then I ended up, there was this competition to break a world record on a trapeze, spinning around on a trapeze. And I thought I could do that. So I spun around and I ended up competing with my sister. It was such a huge thing that would like press from all over the world, from Chicago and then everywhere. The News of the World,
And
BBC.
you broke the record, right?
Broke the record and maintained the record for several years. And then someone came along and broke the record
Wow.
years later. But for me, that was like that long distance runner, that kind of who I am, just hanging in there and being patient and not giving up. That I guess that kind of person is still in me today at this north of 40 stage, as we were talking about.
Yeah, let's
It's like
I want to talk about that, but I want to ask you about music growing up, things that you were listening to when you were growing up.
Sure. Well, with my mom being from Scotland and then my dad being a big jazz fan, Sinatra fan, and just he loved all the early rock and roll with Elvis and uh, just the great stuff. My mom was a big Aretha Franklin fan. She loved Sarah Vaughan. She loved Billie Holiday. She loved her blues singers, Memphis Minnie. She loved all these. She loved a variety of music
So you get
because
to hear all kinds of stuff in your house.
oh yeah, Hound Dog. I mean, you could hear all this stuff that she grew up with in Scotland, but not so much here in America, right? Because you didn't have all these blues tunes on the radio, on popular radio in
Right,
America, but you
right.
sure did in Scotland.
Well, it was underground at that time. You couldn't.
You could hear Albert King. You could turn
Right.
on the radio in England, or the coming out of England into Scotland. You could hear Albert King. You could hear Buddy Guy. You could hear, you could hear the musicians, the blues music. So I heard all this from her records,
Yeah.
and she brought those with her, as did she brought her. She first came, and then she brought her brothers along with her. She came from a large family, right? And so she was a trailblazer,
Like
and
you.
very,
Like
yeah, and
you.
very much a musician herself. Very much in fact, she's talking to one of her friends now on WhatsApp in Scotland. They were always, and she was mentioning to my mom recently at Christmas. They talked for an hour. She's still, my mom's turning 85 in March, and she's like, "Oh, Patricia, you were the one who could sing in the school. You were so fantastic." And my mother she was an amazing singer, and she won contests and she won scholarships, but her family was not willing to. They didn't urge her in the music direction. In fact, they urged her in the convent direction.
Wow.
So, yeah, unfortunately, they urged her in the convent direction, which she left. But she probably would have made a really good nun, but she made a really good mom. And she's been an example for me in music, and both in music and everything, really.
So when do you become a full-time musician?
I would say, well, really, I wasn't really given the opportunity to become a full-time musician until Lincoln College closed in March 30th of 2022. Up until that point, I had always been teaching or working in television and really, juggling and managing my music along with these other talents that I have, right?
So
Because I was always
it's later on in your life that you became a professional musician.
correct. Well, I was always working as no, back up though. I was
Yeah.
always working as a professional musician, earning money as a professional musician always, but full time, not until Lincoln College closed. Yeah.
Let's
So
talk.
when Lincoln College closed, my husband was like, "Okay, it's time for you to just focus 100% on this." And that was a little uncomfortable for me, because it still is a little comfortable for me, because I like to, teach and take care of those around me, and just kind of just
Yeah, but this
it,
is your time now to
yeah,
shine.
I know, and I need to be constantly reminded of that, because I'm like my mom. I'm a giver, and
Well,
and
that's a
so
good thing. You can do both if you really wanted to.
yeah. I'm trying to balance the two route a bit right now. But what I find though is when you are working full time, as my husband says, you find that there's so much to do. Right? You got today. Back in the day, you just put your posters up for your gig. You just you get your
Yeah.
gigs.
Today is
Now
not the same
that's
today.
not over, man. You got to have your merch. Your merch is what makes the money. Your album doesn't. Your disc, your CD doesn't make any money. If you're
You
lucky,
got to promote
thankfully I am.
yourself online so people know who you are. I mean, there's a lot.
Yes, there's a lot, but I mean, fortunately, I have sold a lot. This last album, I've been selling a lot of the CDs that I take to gigs. Thank God. But I mean, really, it's about the merch. That's what you're making money on, and the music licensing piece. That's what I'm going back to, and hopefully we'll start making some money on these tracks from these recent albums now that I'm digging into that. I've made some money there in the past, but so there is money to be made in this business, but it doesn't come so much from the gigs unless you're playing the bigger festivals. but it does come from your original songwriting, which that's my thing. I write my songs. That's what I really
And
do.
you have your own, you own your publishing and everything?
Yes.
Yeah, he better these
Yeah,
days.
you better. And I often, while I write my own songs, I also co-write my songs with a Chicago guitar musician, John Krieger, who's just an exceptional. We composed together, and we've known each other since before he had his family and his wife and kids that are so awesome. And so we've been working over the years, and just being around his kids while we're writing songs has always been really fun. So he and I are really great collaborators. I love to collaborate with whomever, but there's just a comfort zone working with John. Would love to work with other folks, but so we've actually now again just been writing all these songs during the downtime period, and like end of December, January. I'm writing a whole bunch of new material. But as you were mentioning before, the cost of recording in the studio is high, right?
Yeah.
So you got to have gigs to play these new songs, and then you got to go spend the money on recording, and
And
it's a lot.
travel and
And
everything else.
travel. Oh man, it's you can have all the talent in the world, but you got to have the funding to put behind this. And then again, the idea of being a marketing person to shoot out, "Hi, I'm out here and I'm having a great day today," doing getting ready for my gig or whatever, or you have to present some sort of interesting angle about yourself. Where for me, I'm not comfortable bragging about myself. I just
Yeah,
want to play the
but you got a
music.
publicist who can brag for you. I know him.
Oh, please send me that person, because I don't have. I need to find a good one, because it's not my wheelhouse so much. I like to brag about others, but I have a hard time
Oh,
personally.
you got a booking agent I saw, so that's good. Not everybody
Jay's
has.
oh Jay is fantastic, but the social media piece, yeah, that's where I need. You know, so if you, anyway, that's a conversation off Zoom.
So so tell me about this time you I was like blown away when I read it. You were part of
What?
Second City. How did that come about?
Second City. Well, as I mentioned before, where we were chatting before, the two places I landed when I first decided to come back to Chicago and leave college, um, Second City, because I was always so interested in Saturday Night Live, and I was a person who could mimic voices and accents and make people laugh. And then
Can you still
Kingston
do it?
Mines,
Can you still do
Kingston
it?
Mines. Of course, yeah. I mean, oh yeah. I mean, I had what? How many? Four total solo shows that were theater and music together, and I
Wow.
performed some of those in New York. And what was it called in New York City? Oh my God. Now I'm gonna draw blanks about the places I performed my shows in New York.
So you did comedy and music.
Yeah, yeah, and I wrote these solo shows often with social commentary, which always Second City was always that's what Second City was always
Yeah.
about. So these shows that always had like a meaningful message about how to make the world a better place, right?
Right?
And I performed these characters in the Bite Show, and then Is There Anything Going On Upstairs, and The Blues and a Color, a conversation about race, um, and Detail of a Detail. Anyway, these were shows that I did, and I actually had great success with them. And I was also on a PBS television show here in Chicago called Wild Chicago, and I was a host and correspondent for that show, and also for Art Beat Chicago. Worked in producing for that show. So I've been involved with media and music and all of it for a long time.
Good.
Yeah.
So you have a few records out. The
Yes.
Flame and a live album and this current one, which
Yes.
is
Sundown
really
Rising. Yeah.
good, Sundown Rising.
Yes. Thank you, John. So it sounds like you've listened to it.
I have.
Which songs do you like?
I like the whole thing.
Oh,
How's that?
that makes me really happy.
And when I rebroadcast our interview, this interview, I'm going to play a few songs from it.
Thank you very much. Well, it's all from the heart.
Tell me a little bit about writing that. That was a little different for you to do that record.
Yeah, I mean, The Flame was some songs I had written while I was going through COVID. And then this one was really written as coming back to here, and then the struggles of reestablishing yourself. You know, nobody knows who you are, or they
Yep.
know who you are from who you were before, and they don't really care because you're at an age and stage where really you're gonna you're gonna get out and do this now at your age and stage, really,
Why
you
not?
know?
Why
Yeah,
not?
yeah. Why not is exactly
Well,
right,
look
but
at I'm going to give you an example of that.
yeah,
Look, there's a guy. I don't know if you know Toronzo Cannon.
of course, yes, I do.
He's
Great
one of those
musician,
guys that worked all his life on a bus in Chicago, and
right?
now he's retired from that. And what is he
That,
doing full time?
that's right. Yeah,
So,
Toronto, he's awesome. What a great person
so
too.
they. I mean, that's the same thing as what you're doing. Basically, is you're retiring, kind of semi-retiring from what you were doing,
Kinda.
right?
Yes, yes, yes. And so yeah, okay. So Sundown Rising was reestablishing myself.
Yep.
He was, I think, while he was driving bus, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember watching his posts. So he was here in Chicago, and while he was driving, he was going and doing the blues jams and playing blues. So while he was driving bus, and then he retired, and they put everything. For
Full,
me, I was down in Central Illinois, got married, raised a stepchild, and then came back here after being away from here for, wow, 16 years. And so it's kind of like reestablishing who you are. So that's been a challenge. And I'm also moved away from my jazz kind of pop thing that I was doing and went back to the blues where I started in Chicago. So I'll even run into people who are like, "Oh, Denise La Grassa, she's that great jazz singer." It's like, no, no, I'm not. Don't confuse
not
that.
anymore.
No, not anymore. No, so I'm going back to where I started with the whole blues soul kind of roots that I
Yep.
was in. And to me, why? Why was it? Why did I decide to do that? Because having gone through the jazz program, and first to go through the jazz as a performer, and then to go to a university and study jazz and want to end up teaching jazz, go through a master's program, go through a PhD program. It's like jazz, when it was evolving in America, was very much a foreground music. It wasn't more of it, to me today, kind of quiet background music and more of a niche music, right? And so for me, the blues and the soul, kind of where I began, is a foreground music. And I want to speak my stories and tell my music in these stories and the heart wrenching stuff that we all go
Well,
through as
some
humans.
of some of that blues that was happening during that jazz era, the blues singers had big bands too.
Yes, they did.
So,
Yeah, and again, not to say that they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, it's
right.
like you see and you hear the great players with their horn sections, right?
Yep. And then
So right.
go back to your mother and her records. So they came back. They come back to you now still.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean that's it. I mean, I don't have the kind of money to blend that. The horn
It's a lot of
the
money to
horns.
have a big band like that these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, and I know the people I'd want to hire to do that, but it's not there. The musicians I work with will say, "Hey, Denise, you got to call this guy to play sax or play trumpet or whatever." Or the It's like, yeah, well, we can't do that yet. You know what I mean? You can't. You got to start small, even if it's playing a duo gig or playing a trio gig or whatever. You got to start small
And
or
work your
play
way up. Yeah.
and then you have your larger band gigs. But every gig is taking that new tune out that you want to play, or taking the blues standard out that you want to play, and growing it, or putting it in your voice, right?
Yep.
Like that. What is it? I'll play the blues for you, right? And I put my spin on it. You
Yep.
know, that's how I've always been. And refresh it. Don't do it the way they did it. Do it the way you want to do it and the way you want to speak it. And again, the Second City part, in terms of what we were discussing before, Second City you were always performing live before an audience, and I used to make these songs up very well on the spot. And that's when I realized I had a real gift for melody. So you're making songs up on the spot that are suggested from the audience. And to me, it blues goes hand in hand, because the blues performer is really if you're the true blues performer, like Toronto Cannon, right?
Yeah.
You're really a theatrical performer. And that's coming from that tradition of the blues.
Yeah.
And like Buddy Guy, you go down and you see him. You can see him there all month in January here in Chicago. You're seeing the legend. You're seeing the true tradition. You're seeing the storyteller on stage.
Yep.
You know? And to me, you got to tell the story. It's got to come from the raw emotion, the authentic raw emotion. It's great to have it's great to improvise and have all that, show off stuff going on. But it's really about that communication between the human spirit through the struggles that we're going through and how we heal through the blues, right?
What's the club scene like in South Side, West Side, North Side, Chicago
Here,
days?
to me, I mean, if I'm looking at it right, it's like it seems like the blues scene is actually growing in Chicago. In fact, I've heard there's a new club on the South Side. I want to say it's around 78th Street. That went up, I think, last May of this year. I got to head back down there and knock on their door. That's a brand new blues club. There's also one that I hear is opening that's going to be blues and jazz on West Randolph, like around, I want to say like West Madison, West Loop. It's going to be called Garcia's.
Wow.
So that's coming soon. It's taking over what was the Wishbone restaurant years ago, more of a breakfast place. So I don't know, if I'm reading the sign of the times, it looks like the blues, Chicago anyway, starting to embrace the art form more and create environments where the art form can grow.
Well, I see you play Kingston Mines. That's a place.
Oh no, I haven't played Kingston Mines yet. I'll go there on Sundays to the jam session when I can. But that's where I first started playing, and at a place called Blues Etc. Back, it was, I think it's just called Blue. Is it still Blues Etc.? It's on Clark Street, right by the Chicago River. That's where I used to play when I first came to Chicago. But I used to go to Kingston Mines and just sit in there and play there. But Blues Etc. There was another place on Halsted called, maybe that was called Blues Etc. That's closed now. So that place on Halsted, and then the other place by the Chicago River, those were the places I played. And then I would kind of mix. I wanted a mix of like blues and soul. So I did these blues, soul, funk gigs for many years.
Wow.
I would travel down to the South Side and work with my funk bands and not think twice about getting on a train by myself, going to like 90th Street, by myself. And the people just looking, going, what's the only red-haired white girl doing on the train, back in like the late 80s, early 90s, late 80s, really. So that's my introduction to Chicago.
So you play in the Midwest a lot. You're in the Chicago, the Illinois area.
Yes, yeah. And back in the day, we would play New York City, would play Edinburgh Theater Festival music side. I've played in Germany, Switzerland. Wow. Yeah.
So you've been overseas.
Yeah, and I would love to return with this music. Yeah.
You might. You never know.
That's the prayer. Hope so.
So tell me, how do people find out about you? You have a website?
Yeah, the Denise La Grassa band website, and there's shows listed there coming up.
Name a few shows coming up that you're going to be doing.
We're going to be at Clara. I'm really excited about that. We're going to be at the Slippery Noodle in Indianapolis.
Very well-known blues club. That place.
I know. Very excited to return there, actually. Let's see. What else is happening?
A lot of recordings done at the Slippery Noodle from major.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. Oh. Well, we've got that going on. Going up to Madison to play a place called the Red Rooster. That's in April.
Madison, Wisconsin, home
of Madison. Yeah, but yeah. And so we'd love to get out east. Got to get Jay to get over to your neck of the woods. So
Yeah, you come over here. We'll record you. You come into the studio. We'll
that
bring the
would be
band in,
completely
and
awesome.
we can do
Yeah.
that. Then you'll have a recording you can release without
I
having to
would
pay
love
for it.
it, John. Yes. Let's get a gig out in Massachusetts for sure.
Yeah, there's places around. City Winery we have, and there's a bunch of places.
Yep. That sounds good.
How about social media? You have Facebook and
Oh yeah, the Chicago. Let's see, Facebook Denise La Grassa band, Instagram. Where else can iTunes? What else am I thinking? YouTube, and then the web page. The web page is the best place to go.
DeniseLaGrassa.com.
That's it.
That's it. Well, I just want to say thank you. We've been on about almost 40 minutes. How's that?
That's pretty good. Thanks for having me for 40 minutes.
You're welcome. And I'm gonna broadcast it this weekend on Saturday.
I'll be very interested to hear which songs you like on the album, John. Thanks for having me.
You can listen in.
And my bandmates really appreciate it too because they're awesome.
Well,
all of them.
tell me before we go. Tell me about who the band guys are in the band right now.
Steve Mann's the man, and he's Steve Mann's on bass.
Yeah.
Mike G on drums. John Krieger on guitar there, co-songwriter.
And you're
Stephen
on
Ryan
keyboards,
on
right?
guitar. Stephen Ryan on guitar. Exceptional musicians. They're like family.
And your keyboards and sing.
And me and my keyboards on the organ there.
And sing. That's good.
And singing and writing the lyrics and the songs.
So yeah, I'm going to broadcast it around 4 p.m. Eastern on Saturday.
Thanks to your audience for checking us out. We really appreciate it.
And they'll get to hear the record, part of the record, when I do it. How's that?
Really grateful.
Well, thank you again. Have a great afternoon and evening, and hope to have you come and play live in the studio one day.
Let's please talk about that. Thank you.
You have my email. Send me your address, and I'll send you a T-shirt.
I will. Thank you, John.
All
very
right.
much.
Take
Happy
care.
New Year.
You
Take
too.
it easy.
Same
Thank
to you.
you.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.